We've made good progress on the rear end of this car and the doors, and now we're moving on to the chairs, the dashboard, and this whole central tunnel section here. So we've really got our work cut out today. The first thing I'm going to do is get rid of this manky piece here and try and replace it with the section from our parts car. So let's have a closer look at that. There are differences between the project car and the parts car, the most obvious one being that this is right-hand drive and the other car is left-hand drive, but that shouldn't affect all of this. The other difference is that this 450 SL has a handbrake here, whereas the project car is a left-hand drive with a foot brake. So we need this section here out of the car, and in order to get this out, the very first thing we need to do is take out the ashtray, and then behind the ashtray are a couple of screws. Once you've taken those two screws out, the next thing to do is to take out this piece here. Now it comes out this way because remember there's still attached by a wire, the cigarette lighter wire. You need to try and take that out without scratching the trim too much. This trim looks in pretty poor condition, but this will polish up nicely and it will do just fine for the car. So you can just see the wire here. I'm just going to do that off camera and unplug the cigarette lighter. There we go, we've unplugged that. You can see it plugs in there. It's not in too bad condition. There's some rust on there, but that will clean up with no problem at all. Next up, we're going to undo these two screws here and here. See that this piece of plastic trim is already cracked. So we'll just super glue that back together when we put it on the other car. Once you've undone those two screws, this trim piece should lift up like so. Now remember, there is a peg, a plastic peg on the other side of this that goes in this way. So when you take this trim piece off, you've got to slide it back towards the back of the car. Don't just try forcing it and lifting it up, otherwise you will end up breaking that peg. And also remember that there's going to be wires underneath here connecting the hazard light switch. On this particular car, there's also this aftermarket alarm which makes life slightly trickier. Okay, so there we go, that's the hazard lights undone. Okay, we've got that off there, and that looks to be the same plug that's on the other car, which is good. We just need to get a little pair of pliers and undo that. Looks like this is one of these stores that these squirrels used for nuts in there, but that's not going to be a problem. We're just going to cut these wires here. These are just from an aftermarket alarm. I don't think we'll ever use this on the new car, but just in case we do, we'll just make a note that the red goes to the red. Next up, we're going to try removing this control panel. In order to do so, you need to pull these sliders here off. They just pull straight off. If you're lucky, you won't break any when you do it. They pull off like so. This also pulls straight off like that. Now this panel here invariably gets broken because people don't know how to take it off. Once you've taken the sliders off and the switch off, don't just try and yank this panel out because it's actually screwed in here and here underneath these little trim pieces, and these trim pieces clip in at the tops here and here. Someone's obviously taken this piece out previously, probably the people who fitted the alarm, and they didn't know how to do it, which is why this is broken. But there are clips here and here and two on the bottom, and ideally you should just be able to squeeze this in gently or just get a little watchmaker screwdriver underneath there and prise that out. And once you've prised it out, there are two Phillips screws on either side here and here. Now invariably people don't know that, they can't find those screws, and they end up yanking this out and breaking the plastic tabs, which is exactly what has happened here. My daughter's a little bit scared of spiders, and this would be her worst nightmare because there's a plethora of creatures living in there. Now to get this off, it's just a matter of very carefully disconnecting the plugs. There's one main plug here for the fan. I know I've said this many times before, but it's important to be patient and do these things slowly. This plug here may not have been off for 50 years, and if you try and yank it off, you may end up cracking this plastic. So we're just going to try and get a flat blade screwdriver in the bottom and very carefully go around and lever it up bit by bit. If you are patient, eventually you'll be able to work these things loose without breaking them, because breaking these fittings can be really, really annoying and super expensive. Okay, I think we've just about got that. Okay, there we go. That's that one free, and there's a few little light bulbs, etc. here, which, once again, just make a very careful note of where these light bulbs go. There's one light bulb in here. They should just pull straight out like so. There's another one in here. Not sure how that one comes out. I'm just going to look at that off camera. Once again, it's highly unlikely that we'll use this aftermarket alarm system here. This front part just clips onto this back panel here, which is just held on by two small screws. We'll put everything together in the same bag, just in case we do decide to use any of this. We'll know how it goes back together. The back of this wire is this wire here. One part isn't attached to anything by the looks of it. The other part we're just gonna cut. These little grey wires just clip onto that plug and pull straight off like that. And that should allow us to take this piece out. You can see that the plastic tab on this side is broken where it's just been forced out. We may just be able to glue that back together. It's a little bit cracked on that side as well. We'll be able to super glue that back together, but that almost always happens when people try and take these bits out without knowing how they actually come out. This little piece here is just clipped in there, and on this particular car it just falls out. Sometimes those are glued in, sometimes they're clipped in. The first piece comes like that, and then this little white piece of plastic comes out as well, like so. Now we will be replacing the trim on the project car, and one thing that's important to get right is the actual shape of the trim piece. Now if you look here, there's one solid rectangle cut out. You can get trim pieces that have a piece of wood down the middle, but where you have these sliders here, those whole sliders clip out, leaving one solid rectangle. So when you look at the shape of the trim piece for your control panel, make sure you get the right one that corresponds to your car. Rather annoyingly, all of this plastic trim here is cracked and broken. This should all be part of this central plastic section, but it's not a tragedy. We should be able to super glue all of that back together. Next thing we're going to try and do is take out this stereo section here. This doesn't want to come out. It's loose, but it's attached at the back, and I don't want to force anything, so I'm just going to undo this last screw here. We managed to do that without dropping it. Important to make a note of the screws, where they go, what size they are, so when you put the whole thing back together, you'll have a head start. I'm going to take out this cracked piece of trim here, once again noting that there are two of these grey wires attached to the light bulb there in the top right hand corner. Those wires just pull straight off. Okay, with a little bit of force and effort, we managed to get this cage out, and it is indeed held in place with all of these wires. So we're just going to disconnect this. I think that's probably an earth wire there. Disconnect these two things there, and hopefully that will just leave the plug behind, and we'll be able to take this cage out, de-rust it, and decide whether we're going to use it for the other car. The stereo plug is just held on by two little Phillips screws here and here, one of which I've obviously dropped and lost already, and there's a little earth wire here connected to the cage. We're just going to set about cleaning this central console, which we took out the gold parts car. There's some damage to it. This is very brittle, but not too bad at all. Obviously this central console has been out before, and the people who took it out were not aware of how it actually comes out. So if you do have an older SL, bear in mind there are two plastic tabs at the end here that screw into the footwells to attach this in. You'll also notice that on the older SLs, this is all one moulded piece, whereas on the 1983 SL we did, these pieces clip into here and you can separate this top piece. The other thing to notice is where this car's had a stereo previously, if you don't know how to get these plastic trim bits out, you invariably end up cracking all of the plastic trim, so we're going to have to try and glue that back together as best we can. But we're going to start off just by cleaning this up. We'll vacuum clean this carpet. This carpet is attached to here on a rubber backing. I've not really seen that before, so at some stage we'll re-trim the car with black carpet, but meanwhile we'll just clean up this carpet for the time being and then clean this down just with some cleaner, and then we'll be painting this with some plastic adhesion as a sort of undercoat primer, and then we'll spray it black so it looks like a new piece again. Cleaned that central console down, and now we're going to go over that with some plastic adhesion promoter, and then we'll put some primer on there, and then finally we'll paint it black. This stuff here basically will help the paint and the primer stick to plastic without having to sand down a rough surface first. The adhesion promoter has dried now, and you can just about see what this used to look like before it all faded. So how well that comes out on camera, and that's what we're going to try and get back to. Now what I'd normally use is a standard grey high build primer, but because the chairs are potentially going to slide back and forwards on here, if we do have any chance of scratches etc, I don't want them to show through, so we're going to go over this with a Ultra Build, the Sunox Ultra Build black primer. And then we're going to go over it with the Sunox Black 1, and this is what we use to paint dashboards in the other Mercedes. Came out really nicely. So we're going to start off with a couple of coats of primer, and then we'll finish off with a couple of coats with that Sunox, and that should bring this something like new again. That's the first coat of primer on. Obviously the disadvantage of using a black primer is that you can't see where you've sprayed, but this is not a big piece, so we can basically cover these in one swoosh. We'll probably give it a couple of coats of primer, let that dry for 20 minutes, come back, give it another coat, and then go over with the Sunox, and that should be that piece. This piece has come out really nicely. We've given it one coat of the plastic colour Black 1 on top of the black undercoat. We're just going to give it the final coat, and then this piece will be ready to go back on the car, and that is looking like new. This is the Ashtray housing from our parts car, and you can see it's a little bit rusty, so what we'll do is we'll just go over the loose rust with a wire wheel, and then we'll pop that in a rust bath overnight, and we paint the front of that black. We're just going to pop that into the rust bath, and in there is 1 glass of the Deox sea crystals and 19 glasses of boiling water. From experience, I have learned that some alloys will dissolve in this rust bath here, and one of those alloys is those metal contact strips, whatever they're made of. So the advantage of using this cut off 5-litre container is we can wedge in the bit, just the bit that we need, and keep that out of the rust bath because we don't want to dissolve it. When that's done, we may well de-rust this cage here. I'm not sure whether these cages are specific to the actual stereo. I suspect they are, or whether we'll use this in the new car, I don't know yet, but we might as well pop it in the rust bath anyway because it'll get all of that rust off. This has been in the rust bath overnight, and hopefully we'll see that most of the rust has come off, which it has. We'll just wash that down and pop that in. You can see that all the rust has come off here, most of the paint too, so we'll just get the remainder of that paint off, and then we'll go over that with a rust encapsulator where it was painted black, and go over that with some extreme chassis black satin just to finish that off, and the metal bits where the alloy there where it was rusted, we'll just go over that with the chrome galvanizing MRO. Took an awful long time to mask that up, but we're just about ready now to go over that with some rust encapsulator, and then we'll top coat it with extreme chassis black. We're just going to finish this off by gluing in the cracked plastic. It's not ideal, but as I often say, you can only work with what you've got. So we're just using super glue to glue that. We've pretty much finished the central console now. This has come out really nicely. That extreme chassis black is a really lovely finish. We have ordered the Zebrano parts, the wood parts, hugely expensive. We've painted up, stripped off the rust and painted this little cage as well, just in case we need it. I'm not sure that we will. And this is ready to go back on the car. And we're not going to put it on the car just yet because the Zebrano trim bits, I think, entail taking the dashboard out, which entails taking this piece out. So I'm going to leave the video there, but that is how you remove the central console, refurbish it without damaging and breaking it all.